Welcome to the space where ambition meets alignment and success stops costing you your sanity. I'm Janessa Finley Ford. I'm a former perfectionist. Maybe I'm a little bit more of a perfectionist than I think as I stumble on that. I'm a recovering people pleaser, and I'm one of your guides here this evening in ditching the burnout without dimming your brilliance. I blend the spiritual laws with neuroscience and soul so you can rise, recalibrate, and remember who in the hell you are. And I don't do it alone, so let's meet the other voice behind this mission.
I'm SJ. I'm a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner. I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire your energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
And today on Eyes Wide Open, we're taking that exploration one step forward. Because when it comes to new beginnings, especially the ones that you didn't choose, the unseen forces actually matter more than the circumstances themselves. So today we're going to continue working with the law of vibration as we did in January. We're going to add in the Enneagram and the subtle ways your nervous system, your perception, and identity patterns quietly shape how you experience change. And the unseen focus in this episode is really simple but powerful. And we're just going to highlight what happens when your system resists a new beginning has already arrived based upon the programming of your personality. So here's the very real and very human dilemma that we want to solve today. You're in a new chapter, but you can't seem to fully move into it. You know what I'm talking about. And it's not a capability issue. It's because part of you is still negotiating with the past. Like you just really don't want to be here in this situation. So maybe you can negotiate your way out of it. And all of this is predetermined within your personality. In the physical world, that resistance shows up in familiar ways. And we're going to talk about those here. You're going to find yourself procrastinating, or you might find yourself overthinking decisions that used to feel easy. Or maybe you feel chronically tense or tired, even though nothing is technically wrong. Or perhaps you're busy, productive, and doing all the right things, yet something feels off, flat, or just simply heavier than it should be. So today we're diving into why that happens, how each enneatype unintentionally dilutes their power during unwanted new beginnings, and how to shift your vibration out of survival back into self-leadership. So this chapter doesn't just move forward, but take it a step far further so that it actually supports you. If you have been asking yourself, why does this feel so hard? You're in the right place. So let's open our eyes to what's really going on. Now, we usually start our show with a funny story, but I really want to invite you into inspiration of maybe a kind act or a kind deed. So I'm going to start our story with a little more serious touch than normal. But I was at the grocery store this weekend. There was a woman in line. You know, you've been there. Like, there I was in this line, like long line, dreadfully long line, taking 16 times longer, which is really inefficient for an Enneagram one, to get my groceries than what it should take. And you just want to keep moving. And the woman in front of me was talking to a younger girl checking out in front of her and suggesting that this girl was going to buy her milk, actually, to make the line go quicker. And she even said, oh, I'm just kidding, of course, whatnot. So the checker got to her milk and scanned it. And I said, I'll just pay for it. You can keep going. And the woman had her $10 of cash in her hand, which I saw as I was standing there waiting. And then I saw her really freeze. Like I had done this kind deed act, which was super simple, let's be real. And she just froze. And I'm like, you can take your milk. I'm just going to pay for it. And she didn't even look at me. Like she's just standing there looking at the checker, checking the food. And I think that what was happening internal in her world was freaking out that she only had $10 and all this food is getting rang up on her, on her bills, so to speak. And so the clerk told her again, like, you can take the milk. And then she was like, oh my gosh, she throws her hands up. She wraps me up in this huge hug. And guys, milk is like $3. But I'm sharing this story not about me. I'm sharing this story for you because I think all of us, when we turn on our TV, when you check news articles, like people are convinced that we are living in the worst of days, in the doomiest, gloomiest times, and this is news for the soul. So I thought we should start our show with infusing a story about news for the soul because these simple little acts, like the checker was even like, oh my gosh, that was the coolest thing because some people would be really underwhelmed and just take their milk and be like, hey, thank you. Like her super animated, like her arms went up and out and she was so filled with joy was fantastic. And it was so simple. And you know what? It made my freaking day for standing there in line for forever too. So everybody wins. So, transitioning into our conversation, though, for real today about new beginnings, going through the different Enneatypes and how they resist the new beginnings that they really don't want in the first place. And some of these might, kind of seem sneaky. Like, you do it, but you don't realize that it causes resistance because you think it's actually helping you move through the situation. So, we're going to start today with our Enneagram 8, who's the challenger, and they're the really bold type, natural born leaders, delegators, just they will just take charge and make things happen. I was working with an Enneagram 8 recently who was expressing actually some frustration with a new beginning that they were transitioning through, and it involves someone else. And they said, I just don't understand why they don't fix their ish. You fill in the blank if we have young children listening, just fix it. Like that's the normal thing to do. And I'm like, oh, isn't that just such a lovely Enneagram 8 perspective? So, where Enneagram 8s will really bypass through a new beginning that they don't want to experience and create resistance is through just powering through, quite honestly. So they're going to dominate the transition instead of listening to it. And I think you see that outlined in the very real life example I gave you with the individual I was working with. So just that domination, that push, that force, and the vibration hardens. And that's what creates the power dip. So you feel strong because you're leading, you're going, but you're actually doing it disconnected from wisdom and nuance because there's a lot of nuance in the world. And when we get too much in our head and too much in force, we also disconnect from wisdom. So, what I want to invite you into for upgrading your leadership is to let someone support you, Enneagram 8, without managing the process. So, SJ, what else do you have to add in the observations of the Enneagram 8s in your world?
I often see the resistance entirely to the new beginning. So you can hear things like, well, that's not how we do it, or this is how we've always done it. So wanting to stay in that controlled state where the new beginning or the change doesn't actually come to fruition. So being more forceful with the resistance of keeping the status quo or the thing that they already control the same rather than leaning into what that new beginning could hold. So I see the opposite happen with them often too, with their resistance to the new beginnings of really wanting to stay in that old way of doing things just because that is what they've always done. And they'll also find reasons of like, why should we change it, right? Like, this has always worked this way, so the other way isn't going to work as well, especially if that new beginning feels like a loss of control to them. Like, if it's giving that power to someone else to continue with those new processes. I see that a lot with the Enneagram 8s, as well as what you said, really encouraging them to move into a space where you rely upon feedback from your team, the community, whatever is happening with this new beginning. It's likely not a new beginning just for you. It is also going to be new for many people in your sphere. So listening to that feedback of how do they feel? How do they feel about that new beginning? What do they think about it? And just kind of gathering all of that information and then deciding how to move forward in a controlled manner that is still supportive of that new beginning. Because often that resistance is only going to keep us away from the new beginning for a short period of time, but it's not something that's sustainable. And they will eventually max out. Even an Enneagram 8 who can go longer than any of the rest of us, you will still hit that maximum capacity to where you will tank. Even if you don't believe that it will happen, you will eventually hit that to where there is no choice now except to lean into and move into the new beginning. But rather than having the new beginnings feel rocky and rough and harsh, listening to that feedback that's around you to really take a moment to feel into the energetics, not just of yourself and how you feel about it, but also what the overarching theme seems to be with the group that you're navigating that with. That's what I have for the Enneagram 8s and the control. Moving into our Enneagram 9s and how they may resist the new beginnings. Avoidance is the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Like just straight up avoiding it entirely. Of maybe if I don't acknowledge that it's there, I won't actually have to lean into or do this new beginning that I don't really want to do, perhaps because it feels like conflict. Change can feel like conflict in general to the Enneagram 9 population. So I often see new beginnings for them along with that theme of avoidance really being a lot of if I wait long enough, maybe someone else will make the decision. So then it's actually not me who has facilitated this perceived conflict through the new beginning. I can, pivot it if it was someone else who made this decision for us. So now we can move forward into it. So I see an avoidance of not just the new beginning, but also around that theme of making a decision if it feels like there's conflict within that decision-making process as well.
An Enneagram 9, I'll share more as we move into the one, but they literally saved all of me today going through a new beginning I'd rather not be going through. But the thing that I looked at with the Enneagram 9s was their tendency to go so much with the flow, they deny themselves. So they bypass situations by saying, you know what, it's fine, I'll just adjust, which is great, but they'll take it beyond the point of where they're in tune with their true desires and what they really want in the situation, where their threshold is. They'll go over their threshold, and then they're going to keep all of that resistance, irritation, frustration, annoyance, upset internal. And so, what they really end up doing is minimizing rather than leading. And their power dips from the energy being diffused by the minimization. And vibration drops into numbness instead of presence, which is definitely something the nines will experience quite a lot is numbness. So my invitation for nines for you guys to upgrade your leadership is to really just take one decisive action before the day ends, even if it feels uncomfortable, and to sit with the discomfort if you need to. Um, and process through that so that you can expand your capacity. And also, naming exactly what is the discomfort so that you start tuning into what is going on versus just, I'm fine and I'm going to adapt and adjust. So, my story to bridge between the nine and the one at work, we're going through a new beginning, a pivot, all in its own that has had a succession of many other pivots. And one thing about the Enneagram one is we're not the most flexible by nature personality types that exist. And so while the sevens can just flow through pivot after pivot after pivot, like it's the best adventure they've ever been on, it gets a little rigid for the Enneagram one. So today I had to go and tell people that the work that they had been doing for hours, they needed to go back and change a little legal aspect of that work and redo it. And I about died on the inside because like this is taking everything one pivot too far. Like who came up with this? Come on. So as I was telling them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't shoot the messenger. My Enneagram 9 in the room, who is kind of an unspoken leader amongst their peers as well, where it was the first one to break the silence and they laughed. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for that. Like, it was everything I needed to be able to step out of my rigidity and my own personal inner experience that I was having with the task at hand. So, the way that ones are reformer, they want things to be better and better and better and improve all the things. The way they will bypass during these new beginnings that we don't want is that they'll engage once they figure out the right way to do it. But I really want to take that a step further with what I experienced today and say that they also will engage when they figure out the right way to do it. And when they have to pivot to figure out what the right way is multiple times, they're going to get really frustrated and irritated. And so then they loop back to it, just really reinforces this. Like, well, we need to be more strategic. So while this looks responsible on the surface, like I just justified with how wonderful strategy is for making changes, it's really actually delay at the end of the day. And we call it integrity. It's a sneaky little thing we do. So for Enneagram ones, your power is going to dip because your energy tightens. You could feel that when I talked about the rigidity. I could feel it in my body. I'm sure you could hear it conveyed through the message. And with rigidity, you lose your influence. So what pops up? Generally resentment. And you cover the resentment with excellence. We're going to do a really high level of work. Isn't all of this cute? Like all these inner justifications that happen. This is the Enneagram one. So, my invitation to you to upgrade your leadership is to decide what good enough for today looks like and stop revising it and be okay. And, if you have to pivot, laugh it off, put a smile on your face. Because at the end of the day, your clean action beats a perfect plan, always. Because if you're not moving, you're not going anywhere. But if you're doing something cleanly, you've got a solid foundation to start from.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what I see typically with the Enneagram ones with the new beginnings is in my world, they want a million refinements. We should refine this. Let's have a refinement session to discuss the requirements and how we got here. So I just hear refine, 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 refinement meeting. And then they also want to have an after action report so that we do not ever land ourselves in this new beginning again that was chaos and very inefficient, which it still speaks to what Janessa was talking about. All of it is really a delay, right? Like we're pushing off the inevitable of the new beginning that has to happen to buy us a little bit more time to be better, number one, with how we do it, so that we have less risk, less problems pop up, and things like that. So while their intentions are always pure, right? They're Enneagram ones, they're so good. They have the greatest of intentions with it. They slow the process down to where in my world delivery dates are going to be missed, right? Because we have a date, and if we have to refine until perfection, we're never going to find a place where we can implement. So oftentimes I see the delay of true implementation with the Enneagram 1 leaders because they want the refinement to be so on point that we can implement it efficiency. So there's often a gap between the discovery of the refinement to the actual implementation of the item that we have been assigned. Um, so I just encourage the Enneagram ones to embrace the fact that not every delivery is going to be to their standard of perfection, but we can always have an after action report so that we're better with the next one, which is also not going to be perfect, probably, but it will be better than what this one is because we'll understand how to pivot in a more succinct way. Another item that I see with the ones too is the question often of, like, how did we arrive here? Why didn't we have this solidified before we ever had to get here? Like, why didn't we know this was a risk? Um,
Are
so
you
I,
in my head? Are you in my head? Like, I have been having a conversation with myself for like 3 months about how did we get here?
how did this happen? And often, right, like if you look at that too, when they pose the question, we definitely could have self-identified some of the gaps in the areas, right? But that wasn't where our brains were focused, our hearts were focused. Like we weren't looking at it, is the real answer. And we should totally look at it in the after action report. But while we're doing that, let's move forward and do the new beginning. And we will hopefully have some sevens on the team that can help us pivot and, pick up the risks that are obviously going to be there because we didn't really think this out very well. We just had to do. So that's kind of mine with the Enneagram ones is a little bit more acceptance of the implementation may not be perfect, but we can also follow up with the after action to get better for the next round. But not living in that past energy of how did we get here though? And segueing that into the Enneagram 2, I feel like the Enneagram 2s lean into that. How did we get here though? Like this feels terrible. This would have been so much more helpful had we thought about this stuff prior to arriving here. So for my Enneagram 2 leaders, I think they have a lot of that same vibe of the one of really kind of living in that past experience of like, but how did we get here? Especially if we got here again. And we're experiencing the same thing from a previous delivery in the same chaotic manner to where nobody feels supported in the process. The Enneagram 2 leaders that I work with also focus a lot on how can they help the team be okay with this new beginning while disassociating from what help do they need to be okay with this? Like, are they even okay with this new beginning, or do they have areas that they feel are risky or problem areas. And I feel like anytime there's kind of a difficult new beginning, the Enneagram 2s will self-sacrifice and not talk about their concerns, and they will just listen to the group's concerns to try to help the group navigate their concerns with the new beginning while not focusing at all on the concerns that the Enneagram 2 has, which are super insightful and typically very different from the other individual's experience that could definitely help the project or the program move forward into this new beginning if we could hear what the two is feeling as they're going through the new beginning process too. Um, and then, of course, like the one, you can feel the resentment build for the Enneagram 2 because often, especially if there's not other Enneagram 2s on the team, they're going to overlook that the Enneagram 2 themselves has some issue areas with this and may also need help. And often, especially if you have lots of Enneagram 7s on your team, no news is good news. And if you don't tell me there's a problem, I assume there's no problem, which does not feel supportive to the Enneagram 2 leader at all. Feels very selfish, feels very entitled, probably as well. So, really moving out of that assumption place, which is going to be true for all of the Ennea types, honestly, but moving out of that assumption that the team doesn't care or that your thoughts and feelings don't hold value in the new beginning. So being more vocal with your new beginnings. Now, when we get to the seven, I'm going to say be less vocal. So, hey, get ready for
Stay
that when we
tuned.
get there. Stay tuned for that topic. But the two needs to speak up more. They need to tell more information to the team about how they feel or the problem areas that they see with this new beginning rather than just accepting that their voice holds less value than how the other team members feel.
Yeah, for sure. I really, with looking at this, mapped out that their bypass is that they'll deal with their feelings later. So, a lot of what you talked about, they're doing everything for everyone else and really self-denying on a very deep level because they're positioning themselves to be useful rather than really being truly present to their experience of the situation. And so that's where the power dip occurs because their presence is conditional. And so their power is conditional and their authority is conditional because their authority is being sourced from I'm needed by other people rather than being truly anchored in what they have to offer in the situation. So I wish I had a fun story for you guys to really bring this example to life for you, but I don't. And the Enneagram 7 is the fast thinker on their feet. So here we are. You're also getting to experience our Enneagram dynamics and the conversation as well. So the upgrade that I invite Enneagram 2s into for their leadership deepening is to ask instead of anticipate. because you will see Enneagram 2s, to you, what is an invitation to help, to most other types, there is no invitation that exists. So if someone is having a challenge with something, the default is to move into that posture of helping. So I'm inviting you here to, instead of anticipating what they need, ask them and then check in with yourself. Is that something I can provide? Is that prudent to the situation? Is this balanced? Because your power will return to you when you stop overfunctioning. And that overfunctioning is so deeply rooted into, oh, I see an opportunity here to help. I'm just gonna dive right in. So, in talking about overfunctioning, we'll just move right on to our achievers, the type 3, who really do about go with overfunctioning as a regular sort of situation in their daily life. And by sorta, I mean like full on overfunction because they are achieving. So, our Enneagram 3s are going to bypass the new beginnings by like, I'm just making it work and I'm moving on. They're just so in action and into the doing. They're just going to do the thing and do the functioning. And so they really turn that unwanted beginning into a performance to demonstrate what they can achieve rather than really being present and in it or in tune to their emotions. And that is what creates the power dip because just because the energy speeds up, what you may not realize Enneagram 3 is that it also thins out. So it dissolves. While you may look strong, you're going to feel very disconnected to the situation. And so you drop into this hustle and grind and overfunction instead of presence to what's truly going on. So for you, I invite you into upgrading your leadership by doing one thing really slowly on purpose because your speed is not your leadership, especially when you're recalibrating. SJ had some amazing reels about this as well, that often the slowest person in the room is the one that really truly holds the authority. So Enneagram 3s, that's a really great thread for you guys to rewire and to lean into. Just slow down. Your authority and your power is going to be held in your pace. And we all know you freaking rock and knock it out of the park with getting it done. Just slow it down. See how awkward that feels and enjoy the recalibration. You're welcome.
I'm glad you said how awkward it feels and not how awkward it looks, because that's probably equally as true, but that would be triggering for the Enneagram threes, I'm sure. I'm not very different on this one. What I see with the Enneagram threes with the new beginnings is they move directly to implementation and they bypass all of the refining that we want less of from the one. We need just a little bit, right? Like less from the one, give it to the three, and all will be balanced and good in the world. But oftentimes, when the Enneagram threes move into those new beginnings, they're bypassing everything, including their primary intelligence center, which is how they feel in their heart, because yuck, they don't associate with that at all. And they move directly into their brain of how can I just think my way through this and implement this so that I can get to the other side as quickly as possible and also receive the accolades for doing so quickly with no resistance, to the process of the new beginnings. But what happens is we can miss some really key details that would have made it better. So we would have had less gaps. We would have had more details within how to do this. There would have been information sharing between the teams so that it's not just the Enneagram 3 and the possibly the 7 who know what we're talking about or how to do it. We would have shared with the group to where everybody understands where we're headed rather than the really fast-paced individuals on the team just move directly to implementation and they have no communication or collaboration with the team members. And then when they get to the end of it, they too feel resentful when the slower moving parties are now critiquing what they implemented because there's some things that aren't quite right or accurate or off. Um, and then if they would have just slowed down and brought more people into the fold, they would have still had the quick implementation. They would have still had all of the accolades for moving into the new beginning seamlessly, fluidly, and quickly. while also bringing the team into that aspect as well so that they feel supported. And then you're not stuck holding the buck at the end for, well, you implemented it, but why? What were the business requirements you gathered? Who did you poll when you made the decision to do this? Was it just yourself or like a couple of people? You would have had a whole community of individuals from your team weighing in, providing input so that what you implemented quickly encompassed all of the areas that the team saw that the Enneagram 3 missed, right? Because we're not going to see it all. We're not going to understand all of it. We're not going to be able to always implement perfectly, but the more collaboration we have, the more intelligence centers we have processing the information, finding all of the gaps that, the varying or the different processing centers are just naturally going to miss. So I definitely encourage the Enneagram 3s to slow down, and I love that Janessa said pick one item as well and proceed forward with that rather than taking on everything. Because the Enneagram threes here's the 10 things we have to do, and they immediately move to how can I complete all 10 things? Me. I'm going to do all 10 things like that. Poof. Metadata change. Just kidding. Metadata change isn't the right answer, right? um, but if they would just slow down and allow the team to collaborate, they could be more strategic in what they pick to move forward on. So that is what I have for our Enneagram threes. Moving into our Enneagram fours, also our feelers, also a heart point. I feel like Enneagram 4 leaders often get caught up in the melancholy of the change, the new thing, the lamenting of how terrible this item is or moving into this is. They can become overburdened with the heaviness of those new beginnings to where it stagnates decisioning of what do we do about it, to where they want to lament on how horrible this thing is that's being forced upon them for their new beginning, rather than, hey, what do we want to do about it? Let's talk about how we feel about it for sure. Don't leave that out. But let's have a time on how long we're going to talk about how we feel about it before we try to move ourselves forward into what are we going to do now to move seamlessly and fluidly into this new beginning, because we're going to have to move forward. So rather than romanticizing the struggle, I just encourage the Enneagram 4s to also think about how do I stabilize it? How do I stabilize this rather than romanticizing the struggle and making that the focal point? And by stabilize this, I mean all things, the emotions that are behind it, and also the actions that have to be implemented. So, really moving into the let me find stability within myself first, rather than romanticizing the struggle that we're all going through. Right? We don't have to trauma bond as a team to find a place. Like, don't worry, we're all traumatized by the things we had to do, right? But moving into that, let's stabilize myself, then my team, so that we can make a grounded decision on what we do. But really, I encourage those fours to have kind of a timeline of being in the feels before they try to solution and move forward.
Yeah, for the fours, all very relevant. And I think I'm going to come at it from a little bit different angle for you guys. Hopefully, fours, lean in. And I think your bypass, we have multiple ways to bypass, mind you, for each type, naturally. But I feel it is the waiting to feel aligned before I move. And if it doesn't feel aligned, if it doesn't feel right, we trust so deeply in the feels that we don't move into the action. And so you're waiting for this emotional permission that might take quite a long time to show up for you. And your power dips into, longing and comparison. Something else felt so different, so right. Maybe you just feel misunderstood a lot in these situations of new beginnings that you don't want instead of embodied. And because it doesn't feel aligned, you don't trust that the action you make meaning here, that if I don't do something in perfect alignment, then I'm better off not doing anything. Because if I'm not doing it in the right energy, it's like not doing it at all. But also, if you're not doing it at all, you're not doing it. You're not doing anything. Like, there is a trade-off to start getting into motion before everything is aligned perfectly. And I feel like that can be a hamster wheel that Enneagram 4s ask me how you know, because this is where I go in places of stress where we can really spin our wheels to get into action because we have such a story attached to what's happening. And so, my upgrade invitation for Enneagram 4s is to do something, do one thing, one action from neutral energy with no meaning attached to it. And yes, hear me clearly, I'm saying neutral, and don't allow that to feel mundane, because 4s will have the really high highs, like this feels incredible. And the really low lows, I'm like, this is so mundane and ordinary. I don't even know what is the purpose of this life for anyway. Like, let's really look at what is the big picture here. This is for real how it goes. So find that neutral where you're in the middle and you're not failing or things aren't wrong, but also you're not the coolest slice of toast from buying milk for someone in front of you either. That's the highest high of the high. Like, there is truly an art in being just present with the neutral and moving for the sake of moving. And that is my invitation here for you this evening. As we move into the 5s, I feel like the invitation to move for the 5s as well is relevant, but in a different context. And so we'll get to that in the invitation to upgrade. Let's first talk about the bypass here. The Enneagram 5, we move into our head points. So there are logic, rational, they're relying on their thinking, and they bypass the new beginnings by telling themselves that they just need more information. Of course, they need to know more. Our 5s are our human Google search engines who know all of the things about all of the things. And so you retreat to understand instead of being engaged. And this will cause your energy to collapse inward, of course, because you're withdrawing. And so your vibration drops because of that withdrawal that is not actually sovereignty. And that might be the confusion here from an energetic stance. Now, on the topic of sovereignty, let me quickly plug the February topic, because since we had tech issues last week, this is wrapping up our January conversation around this topic. And in February next week, we're going to move into the law of one, and we are going to talk more about being connected to everything, yet sovereign, and the nuance of that. So the sovereignty conversation is going to go much deeper next week. And 5s, you're not the only one that will confuse your sovereignty as well, your withdrawal as sovereignty, but it's a big place here where you dissolve your power and you bypass where you could show up with greater authority. So my invitation to you, as I mentioned, Enneagram 5s, is around moving. And my invitation is for you to move your body before making a decision. Because leadership truly requires embodiment, not just knowledge and insight. And so get moving, but physically. You can still have some alone time in there in your inner world, in your mind while you're doing it.
We're always on the same wavelength because for the 5s, I really want them to get up and walk away from the computer or whatever the thing is. Like, just walk away from it and don't carry your phone and Google the stuff while you're walking. Like, just leave it all. Leave all the stuff. Leave the books, leave the computer, leave the everything that has more information. I think the Enneagram 5s often bypass their own power within new beginnings because they underestimate what they already know. So they rely on that outside resource system of let me go research all of this stuff from someone else to get more info, and then I can make a decision, except the rest of the team who's not an Enneagram 5 has already made a decision in that delay. To where now the 5 is like, oh my God, decisions have already been made. Was I wrong about my research, or was I like off? Or like, is this new path? I need to research this new path now because this is different than what I had in my head planned out. To where we just kind of get caught in that loop then of not knowing enough. And then 3 weeks later, the 5 will come back around and say, well, we could think about upgrading or enhancing or fixing all of these areas because of this information. Whereas oftentimes My favorite input from the Enneagram fives is when I can get them to just answer the question without needing to go do more research. So reframing the what do I know right now that applies to this situation, and then sharing it, even if it is a half-baked thought that you would have preferred to have researched more information about. Share what you think or what you already know in the moment. And you can caveat it with, I would like to research this more. However, this is what I think right now would definitely help the Enneagram 5 leaders and their team have a direction. Like, give me a direction that will also provoke my thought processes to be somewhere within the same vicinity of yours so that we can maybe come together and collaborate to get to a decision quicker without needing all of the information necessarily to be fully baked into that like perfect little pie of knowledge. But get up, walk away from the computer, think about how you feel in this moment, which sounds so silly, right? Think about it, but just think about like, how do you feel about this? And also, while you're on that walk, what do you already know? Like, what knowledge do you already have in this that is worth sharing with the team so that we can get to a place of implementation and collaboration quicker? But I think the five leaders get stuck in that same loop of withholding info and not sharing it that stagnates out what their team can do. Be willing to share the thoughts, even if they are not in that perfectly bottled research mode of dissertation style that you are known for. And just caveat it to us commoner peasants out here in the world with you're going to do more research and follow up. However, this is where you're at today. We'll definitely appreciate the share with what you already know in that moment. Moving into our Enneagram sixes and how they can struggle with the new beginnings, the fear, right? Like, you're probably like, why are you going to talk about how we're scared of everything and making a decision and I need to be prepared for all of the fallout? Well, because that is your default, right? Like, you are going to go into what does this mean? And am I prepared? Are we prepared? Is the community prepared to survive this? That I also think the Enneagram sixes move into a little bit of that Enneagram two mode where they're not so focused on what they actually think, they're focused on how everything feels for the group of is the group able to move forward. I still swear sometimes that the three and six is flipped. Like, I don't know. Whoever created this Enneagram, are we sure that this is how it works with the processing centers? Because the sixes in my group definitely look at how does the community feel about this new beginning? They focus on others and what the whole group. They also say things like, what are we leaving behind? Like, what is going to get left behind, especially if it's people that are going to get left behind, right? The abandonment issues kind of get brought into the new beginning of what are we losing? I just encourage the Enneagram sixes to not just focus on the loss with the new beginning, but also try to incorporate and think about, bring in what are we gaining with the new beginning? Like, what opportunities are there outside of what have we lost or could lose or maybe need to be prepared to lose. Let's also be prepared for what we're gaining as well.
I was just quickly reflecting on the 3-6 dynamic, and you might have some very growth-oriented threes, or you may have some very stressed out sixes. Like, however,
Right?
they're showing up opposite.
Right?
Maybe due to their growth and or stress response, the arrows, which we talk about some, but not in every episode. We can't get through all of the types if we get that deep into the rabbit hole. There's so much to know about the Enneagram. So I agree. The bypass is really the Enneagram sixes searching for what could go wrong. What if this does go wrong? I'm going to come at it from the angle of the certainty and guarantee that the Enneagram sixes love. They love themselves a guarantee. Is this guaranteed to work? Is this guaranteed to be successful? And certainty doesn't exist in that paradigm. Certainty for us exists in knowing, having certainty that things are going to work out, even if it takes the 19 pivots that might undo an Enneagram 1 along the way, but it's going to work out. So, Enneagram 6s, the certainty. Can you find certainty in something enough for you to move forward and embrace this new beginning that you might not love? Because when you don't, your vibration, it actually tends to oscillate. And that's where the dip occurs. So, you're going to be really busy, but not grounded. You will have anxiety that replaces your authority. And so you have more of that fluttery energy vibration rather than that solid inner fortitude and power energy. And when we talk about the Enneagram 6s, we've mentioned the word pulling here in this show several times. And for those of you, if you may have wondered if that's like doing something with a stripper like pole. Um, just to expand on that concept a little bit more, what we're talking about is actually like asking the people around you, what would you do? And offloading your own intelligence of how you and discernment of how you would move through the situation by collecting feedback from other people, taking a poll, what would everyone else do? And then what is the most logical response of the responses you got from people? And then that's what you're going to do. And so this is also a huge place where your power dips because you self-abandon your own power for the feedback of other people. So, my invitation to you, Enneagram 6, for upgrading your leadership is to identify the actual risk and not the imagined one. And really being able to lean into being able to tell the difference kindly to yourself and have a kind inner voice while you're doing it. Because there also seems to be with the Enneagram 6 the committee in your head that tells you how to do things, where the Enneagram 1 just has one really critical voice. The Enneagram 6 tends to come along with that committee. So identify the actual risk with a really kind, compassionate, intelligent voice that is happy with yourself. So our last type is the Enneagram 7, and I just feel so off brand to dive into the Enneagram 7 when I'm hosting this show with someone who lives the experience of the Enneagram 7 every day. So, SJ, I'm tossing this back to you. Dive in and tell us all about yourself.
Ah. Well, I will tattle on myself. And even if you re-listen to this, you will likely pick up on some of this, even though I'm not stressed out and still good advice. The type 7 likes to reframe discomfort as opportunity while avoiding all of the feelings behind it. So, like, we will positivity vomit all over everybody just to move forward to implementation. Like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to talk about your feelings, actually. I don't want to talk about any of the feelings. I just want to talk about what are we going to do. And isn't this so great that we get to do something new and it's going to be such an amazing adventure? There's going to be lions and tigers and wolves, but I'm sure we won't get eaten because we haven't yet. And everything always just works out for us. This is going to be awesome. And I am so excited to do this with you on this amazing journey we have just been blessed with. We are super annoying. Enneagram sevens are really, really annoying. And we're also really forceful when we want to be positive to the extent of toxicity. Like, it becomes positive toxicity really, really quickly if the Enneagram 7 leaders do not pay attention to what they're doing. And also, Enneagram 7 leaders, you have to acknowledge that everyone has feelings and they matter, including yourself, because they will always come back around to bite you if you avoid them, because you can't avoid them for forever. The team also loses trust when you avoid your own feelings and theirs. So you're going to lose a lot of the integrity value that you say you live upon, right? Like, we like to say that we are so truthful, everything about us, just we never lie, we exude all of this. Your toxic positivity can often be lying by omission. So that's the other thing, because lying by omission is also lying about the fact that we have feelings or that feelings matter. So avoiding really leaning into the one, let's just move into implementation without talking about how this feels or acknowledging even that this is rough, this is hard, this is heavy, this is not ideal, and we hates this adventure that we are having to embark upon. However, we must embark upon it anyways. So giving a timeline, timestamp for yourself and for the team of let's lament together for 8 minutes. 10 is too much. 8 minutes. Let's do it for 8 minutes and then we will revisit it should we need to. But after 8 minutes, we have to move into what are we going to do with this new information and how can we move forward together. But leaving an open door for a revisitation of your team members to talk about how this feels at a later date so that you are both honoring how they feel, how you feel, but also your innate desire to move into implementation, the doing portion. I also think Enneagram 7 should get up and go for a walk before they tell their team this new adventure they must embark upon. So that Enneagram 7 leader can one acknowledge their own feelings around this new information they've been given, but also come to a place of let me breathe for a minute and think and feel about what I want to do with this so that you are not just chaotically throwing shit left and right at your team, because while you can have 5 million thoughts and ideas and whatever and create it on the spot, everything will be fine. I'll just come up with it on the fly. If your team members are not sevens and threes and you're still stressing out your threes, by the way, that is not normal. Like that is a mental disorder likely to most people. However, we have to acknowledge that coming up with a clear strategy first for ourselves, being open to the other ideas, but centering first within yourself. How do I feel about this? Let me think about a clear strategy to move forward. One of them, maybe two, but definitely no more than three. Like, no more than three options that are the best fit. Present those to your team and be open to that back and forth collaboration from your team. That's what I have for Enneagram 7 is you should slow down too and like just process some things first before you immediately run to tell the team this new adventure that they get to embark upon unwillingly with you and how great it is.
I love that you just said strategy. I love that so much. Like, I remember the day when the word strategy would be spoken and you would vomit in your mouth a little bit.
I do
Like,
not like planning. I don't want planning. I don't want any of the strategy. I just want to go do it and I'll figure it out on the way.
for real. So I completely agree. I think the most common way that Enneagram 7s bypass is all of what SJ just explained, but there's the opposite end of the spectrum that I think is really an interesting dynamic with the Enneagram 7s as well. And I think that sometimes they can bypass through a new beginning by being so resolute of what path to take and just being relentless about it despite what might be logical, despite what might make the most sense, despite what might be rational, which is everything that they typically rely upon to make decisions. So if they're not moving toward there's a better option, I'm reframing, better option, better way, and not getting to the root, sometimes you'll see the Enneagram 7 just completely anchored down into this is the way forward and we're all moving in this direction, even if there are six other better ways being presented to me. It's really interesting. But the power dip in the Enneagram 7 as they bypass the new beginnings that they'd rather not have is that their energy scatters, which you can hear that, you can sense that as you talk about, or we talk about the better options, the what I refer to as like the whiplash experience of we're going this way, but now that way, but back to this thought, and now onto that thought. And what they're feeling is this vibration that will lift briefly. And so they have that like wind beneath their wings feeling, but it doesn't actually stabilize. And so that's why the power drops, because when it doesn't stabilize, it's not truly converted into power and it's not moving from a place of power. So to speak to the bypass that SJ talked about, especially focusing on the feelings, my invitation for you sevens to upgrade your leadership today is to stay with an uncomfortable feeling for 90 seconds. No distraction. Just hone in on that bad boy and name every single thing that you notice and observe about it and just let it be okay. You're not dying. You really, it won't be eternal pain. I promise. I promise it won't. So that is all of our types starting at 8 and moving back through 7 here this evening. Ashley, do you have anything else you want to add to anything as we wrap up this evening?
I feel like that's true for all of the Enneatypes, right? Leadership requires us to tolerate discomfort without leaking that energy to other places or disassociating from it or ignoring it. Like if you re-listen to this, we talked about how to tolerate discomfort in different ways for each of the Enneatypes. And I think oftentimes when we feel discomfort, we just move right into we want to fix it, or we want to reframe it, or we want to power through it, rather than that overarching message that Janessa really shared with us tonight of stay present while choosing to move forward. That presence, if you re-listen to this, was true in each of the Enneatypes of how do you stay present in your mind, in your heart, in your body? How do you stay in the moment and really decide then what to do with it? So that's, I think, the overarching message for each of the Enneatypes is stay present rather than immediately moving into how do I fix this? Or can I reframe it? Or how do I power through it?
100%. When you stay present and you're really observing what's going on, if you're in a patterned response, you're going to recognize that there's a pattern. You're going to see, oh, I do this all the time. So if there's one thing to remember from this episode, remember your resistance to these unwanted new beginnings is likely not random, it's patterned. And if you can stay present to identify the pattern, then you're giving yourself space to choose something different. And one of the most common places, of course, that these patterns live is in your personality. That's why we focus on the Enneagram every month. So let's highlight the 3 key takeaways that we want you to carry with you from this episode. And the first is that your Enneagram type, it doesn't just describe how you see the world, it actually predicts how you interact with the world, also how you resist change. Some of you tighten up and try to perfect your way through it. Some of you disconnect and intellectualize. Some of you overfunction. You help or manage. You scurry, you hurry. And you're doing everything for everyone else, so you don't have to feel what's actually happening on the inside of you. And all this means is that your personality is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is why the Enneagram is so freaking hilarious once you learn it, because you'll see yourself doing it and there's levity in it. You'll start laughing at yourself. You're like, oh, there I go. Being an Enneagram 1 again, being an Enneagram 5 again. And all of this is designed truly to keep you safe. But you know what? Safety is not leadership. They're not the same thing. So you're actually exchanging your leadership for safety when mm, I truly believe safety is provided by the divine. So it's not something that you have to grapple to ascertain. So stand in your leadership. That's where your real power is. The second key takeaway we would love for you to have this evening is that your power doesn't disappear during these times of transition that you don't want. It dissipates when you bypass your self leadership. So, essentially, what I just said, that's point 2. Take it home. So, when you're negotiating instead of deciding, or if you numb instead of regulate, when you just force and push through instead of actually containing yourself, those are examples of how you dissolve your energy and you bypass your self leadership. And when you really stop trying, sorry, to outrun the discomfort that you feel, and you instead choose to relate to it consciously, your power will stabilize. The calm is not a weakness, although sometimes it can be mistaken as that, But really, truly, regulation is the strength. Always regulate in your inner world and stand in your self leadership. And the third key thing we would love for you to take away from tonight is that the work isn't to become a different type of person. The work is to lead your type on purpose, is to be more of who you are, to be who you are clearly and cleanly, to recognize your automatic response in real time and then choose a truer next step anyway, even when it's hard, even when it's clunky, even when it's really uncomfortable, because that's how your vibration will shift without the force of the push to make it happen. And that's also when the new beginnings stop feeling like punishment and they start becoming an initiation. And you know that that is the next step to your next level, to the next iteration of you, to your next growth, to your next expanse. And that is all your inner leadership and power as well. Now, if you're listening and thinking, I see myself in this, but I don't want to do it alone, or I'm not sure that I know the Enneagram well enough to recognize the things that you're talking about, that's exactly why Stronger Together community exists. And inside Stronger Together, we do not just talk about the patterns, we do the inner work to unwind them. We take these conversations that we have here on Eyes Wide Open and we take them to a much deeper level so that you have space to step out of that automatic programming and those default responses. You'll experience live calls where we work with your real situations, not just the theory, not just the cognitive information. You're going to learn the nervous system and neuroscience tools that help your body move and shift from survival so that you can actually access your choice. So when you feel those moments of being swept away, you can't do anything about it, you're going to have tools that transforms that for you in a quick, easy manner. And by easy, I mean easier than when you don't have any tools. Sometimes you still have to have that moment to see clearly when you need to push pause, even when you don't want to push pause and you want to go unconscious and just act in the pattern because that's what's normal and comfortable. Inside Stronger Together, you're going to practice self leadership in a community. And that community is going to witness and support and gently challenge instead of trying to just white knuckle your growth in isolation. So, this is where old coping strategies lose their grip on you, where unwanted beginnings truly stop defining you, and it's where you learn to hold more responsibility, more clarity, and more power without burning yourself out, forcing yourself to do it, or betraying yourself. So, if this episode has caused you to really identify something that you've been living, but you want to do it differently, I invite you to join us inside Stronger Together. Come be in a space where your personality is understood and your nervous system's respected and your leadership is strengthened from the inside out. Because those new beginnings will keep coming, the difference is whether you meet them from habit or from your authority. So you can find out more about Stronger Together at strongertogetherinstitute.com. It's our brand new website with so many upgrades, and we cannot wait to see you on the inside. We'll be back here next week, next Wednesday, to launch into our February's topic, as I mentioned earlier in the show. And until then, keep your eyes wide open.